In the grim darkness of the far future, there's only war and death. But sometimes death is not enough. Sometimes it lingers. Sometimes it festers. And sometimes it takes form. Tonight, we sail aboard a plague voidship, a vessel abandoned to the warp and embraced by Nurgle, the Lord of Decay. Its name has been long forgotten, lost among the countless souls it's consumed over centuries. What remains is a husk, a drifting nightmare where disease, mutation, and corruption reign supreme. Few who enter ever return. Those who do are never the same. Imagine a ship whose hull is corroded, scarred by centuries of pestilence, its metal weeping with unnatural filth. The corridors are silent, yet alive with whispers. Something moves in the shadows. Something watches. The air is thick with spores, and every breath tastes of rot and despair. Here, the boundary between life and death, sanity and madness, is fragile and easily broken. As we step closer, the warp around the ship coils like a serpent, tugging at reality itself. Lights flicker on its deck as if the vessel breathes, as if it resents intruders. Strange symbols are etched in corrosion and blood, a language older than the Imperium itself. And beneath the hull, in places unseen, the ship's sickness spreads, hungry, patient, waiting. Tonight, for a single night, we will walk its halls. We will witness the horrors of what was once crew, what is now plague, and what lingers as something far worse. Welcome to a night on a plague voidship. Welcome to the edge of despair. The void is a cold, indifferent grave. Stars glimmer like distant teeth, indifferent to the horrors that drift between them. And there, amidst the infinite black, floats a vessel unlike any other, not alive in the sense of flesh and bone, yet not dead either. A plague voidship, a drifting nightmare, carrying centuries of disease, despair, and corruption to the warp. It appears first as a shadow against the faint glow of the Imperium, a hulking silhouette of twisted metal and rusted plating. The hull is scarred, pitted by centuries of neglect and warp storms, weeping with fluids that defy description. Some say it oozes the very essence of pestilence, a living sickness that infects the mind as much as the body. Its surface pulses faintly, almost as if breathing, a heartbeat of rot and decay. And above all, it waits, waiting for the unwary, waiting for the curious, waiting for the foolish to step aboard. We approach, our ship trembling in the oppressive presence of the plague voidship. Every sensor flickers, as though the vessel resists being observed, shielded by more than just physical walls. Something ancient and patient lurks within. The warp around it coils and writhes like a living thing, tugging at reality, whispering promises and threats in 1,000 languages. A shiver runs down the spine as we draw nearer, a warning that no warning could ever truly convey. From a distance, we see the remnants of the crew, or what once was crew. Shadows flit past broken portholes, grotesque shapes that vanish before the eye can comprehend. Metallic appendages, swollen with infection, twitch and jerk unnaturally. Sometimes a fleeting glimpse of humanoid form appears, only to dissolve into something unrecognizable, as if flesh itself rebels against its own shape. And beneath the hull, the water of space itself seems darker, tinged with the corruption emanating from within. A low, mournful groan resonates through the hull, carried across the void like a funeral dirge. It is not mechanical. It is not organic. It is both and neither, a sound that makes the soul recoil and the mind question its own perception. The plague voidship is not merely a vessel. It is a predator, patient and cunning, feeding on fear before it feeds on flesh. It hungers for intrusion, for the audacity of mortals who think they can chart the unknown. Sensors detect something moving below deck. Not alive, not fully dead. The signs of life, or the remnants of it, are scattered across the hull. Gaping holes, corrosion spreading like a fungal bloom, and the faintest trails of slime that glisten in the dim light of distant stars. Every panel, every hatch seems to hum with anticipation, as if aware of our presence. A smell carries to the airlock, though we are not yet aboard, acrid, metallic, and sweetly decayed, filling our suits with unease. We linger at the threshold, staring at the yawning airlock like children at the mouth of a cave rumored to house dragons. No life remains here in any conventional sense. What remains is something far worse. The vessel itself seems to observe, studying, waiting to decide what shape the intruders will assume next. Corpse, mutation, madness, or worse. And yet, despite every instinct screaming to turn back, curiosity claws at the mind. The night has begun, and we are on the edge of a nightmare that will outlast time itself. The plague voidship drifts silently in the black, patient, eternal. Its secrets lie within, shrouded in filth and pestilence, in the hollow echoes of halls that once carried laughter and life. And now, as we prepare to step aboard, one thought lingers. Whatever waits inside waits for more than our bodies. It waits for our very minds. And in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only one certainty. None leave unchanged. The airlock looms before us, a yawning maw of rusted metal and disease. It is not merely a doorway. It is a threshold between the world of light and the nightmare within. Every panel, every rivet, is stained with something older than memory. Blood, rust, something unnameable that pulses faintly as if alive. The very metal seems to breathe, exhaling a miasma of rot and pestilence that assaults the senses even through sealed suits. We approach cautiously. Each step echoes hollowly against the corroded hull. The airlock door is fused with grime, pitted by corrosion, and scratched with indecipherable symbols. It bears the marks of previous intruders, or the crew themselves, though whether they survived or consumed by what waits inside is impossible to tell. The whispers in the void grow louder as we draw near, carried on the faint currents of the warp, crawling along our nerves. They speak in 1,000 voices at once, promises and threats intertwined, madness, death, despair. A hiss escapes the vented airlock. The internal sensors flicker, showing erratic readings, life signs that defy logic. Something moves within the shadowed interior, a twitch of metal, a ripple of something organic. It waits, patient. We hesitate. Every instinct screams to turn back. Yet curiosity, foolish and irresistible, drives us forward. The door groans as it opens, reluctant. A gust of air, thick and foul, spills into our suits. The smell is indescribable, putrid, metallic, sweetly decayed. It carries the unmistakable tang of disease, of bodies long rotted but still animated in some unholy way. Our vision adjusts to the dim emergency lights, flickering weakly, struggling against the darkness that seems to seep from the walls themselves. The corridor beyond is narrow, lined with panels corroded beyond recognition, their labels peeled away by age, neglect, and the inexorable spread of plague. Drips echo from the ceiling above, forming pools on the grated floor. The liquid shimmers faintly, oily, alive. It moves in ways it should not, crawling across surfaces as if aware, leaving behind a trail of sickness that stains everything it touches. The walls themselves seem to pulse slightly, subtly, like a heartbeat in the darkness. It is as though the ship itself is conscious, observing, measuring our fear, deciding how and when it will strike. Signs of the crew, or what they became, are everywhere. A skeletal hand protrudes from a vent, clawing uselessly at the air. Tubes, wires, and tendrils of corruption snake along the walls, feeding into panels that glow faintly with a sickly green light. Something scuttles in the shadows, too quick to identify, leaving only a wet smear in its wake. The airlock is not merely an entryway. It is a gauntlet designed to warn, to intimidate, to weaken the mind before the body is ever touched. We proceed slowly, the floor grated beneath our boots trembling as if with anticipation. The corridor curves sharply, forcing us to inch forward, never seeing more than a few meters ahead. The distant hum of the warp penetrates the hull, low and insistent, resonating through our suits and bones alike. And somewhere, always somewhere, the whispering continues, a chorus of voices speaking a language that is both familiar and alien, promising relief from pain even as it threatens endless torment. It is here, in the airlock, that the first real choice is made. Do we advance, knowing the horror within will consume more than our flesh? Or do we retreat, leaving the secrets of this plague voidship to drift endlessly in the void? But the airlock is not merely a door. It is a trap. Behind it, the ship waits. Ahead of it, there is no certainty, only the slow, inevitable spread of corruption that will reach for those who dare to step across the threshold. And so we step forward into the bowels of a nightmare older than the Imperium itself, our senses assaulted by rot, corrosion, and whispers of the warp. The plague voidship welcomes us, not with words, but with presence. It knows we are here. It knows we are vulnerable, and it begins its work. The corridors stretch before us like the intestines of some immense, diseased creature. Every step echoes hollowly against corroded metal. Each footfall a reminder that we are intruders in a domain older than the Imperium itself. The lights flicker intermittently, casting elongated shadows that crawl across the walls as if alive. The air is thick, heavy with spores, and every inhalation brings a sting of rot that clings to lungs, sears throat, and dulls the mind. The walls are lined with panels corroded beyond recognition, covered in unknown filth, smeared with stains darker than dried blood. Tubes and conduits twist along the ceiling and floors, oozing fluids that hiss and fizzle upon contact with our suits. Some of these conduits twitch as if aware, writhing in response to movement, feeding the sense that the ship itself watches, anticipating every decision, every hesitation. The corridors curve in impossible ways, forcing a slow advance, the geometry shifting subtly, almost imperceptibly, like the vessel itself is alive and rearranging around us. Signs of the former crew, or what they became, appear intermittently. A hand, bloated and green with decay, clings to support beam, fingers curling as though pleading or warning. The walls bear scratches and claw marks, some human, some not. Occasional corpses lean against panels or slump in corners, their skin blistered and pustulant, eyes wide in frozen terror. Some twitch unnaturally, convulsing as if their bodies reject the decay, but cannot escape it. Others have been partially absorbed by the ship itself, tendrils of corrosion and flesh fusing into metal, leaving grotesque sculptures of suffering. Every sound is amplified in the silence, the hiss of vented air, the drip of fluids, the metallic clang of a distant hatch. Each noise resonates through corridors, creating echoes that seem to imitate voices. Whispers grow louder, almost coherent. Pleas for help, curses, promises of release from the plague. They lure the mind into doubt, fraying courage, pushing sanity toward the edge. It is impossible to know whether these voices come from a warp, the ship, or the tortured remnants of its crew. Something moves ahead, too quick to identify. leaving only a smear of blackened slime on the walls, a foul stench that pierces the suit's filtration systems. Shadows twitch at the corner of vision, shapes too tall, too thin, too wrong. We are watched, stalked, measured. The corridors are a predator's den. Each turn and junction, a calculated trap to separate the body from the mind. Panic is not sudden here. It seeps insidious, creeping with each step. The ship seems to mock attempts at logic. Corridors that should be parallel converge and diverge unpredictably. Grates and stairways lead to nowhere, looping back upon themselves. Rooms vanish, replaced by solid walls smeared with filth. There is no map, no safe path. Only the relentless spread of infection, decay, and the omnipresent hum of the warp running through the ship's hull. And beneath it all, something waits. Occasionally, the floor quivers, as if the vessel breathes. A wet squelch echoes ahead, followed by a gurgling groan. Shadows stretch unnaturally along the walls, forming shapes that resemble humanoid figures, yet with limbs too long, torsos bloated, faces stretched into silent screams. Our suit sensors flare intermittently, detecting movement that vanishes when directly observed, confirming the suspicion. The ship is alive, and alive in a way that feeds on fear, thriving on hesitation and disbelief. The further we progress, the closer the whispers become. They're insistent now, intimate, suggesting memories, desires, fears. Some urge surrender to the infection, promising release. Others threaten eternal torment for even looking, even breathing. And all the while, the corridors stretch on narrow, twisting, unending. To step forward is to submit to the ship's rhythm, to acknowledge that we are prey in a predator's lair. Yet there is no turning back. The airlock behind is sealed, and the path ahead is all that remains. Every turn is a reminder. The Plague Voidship does not merely house disease. It cultivates it. It toys with intruders, infects the mind before the body, and with each step, the certainty grows. Somewhere ahead lies the heart of its corruption. Somewhere ahead waits the engine of this nightmare, feeding on the madness, decay, and terror that we now bring into its halls. The corridors are only the first test, and already we are beginning to fail. The corridor opens into the crew's quarters, a place that should once have been mundane, even comforting. Beds, lockers, and tables clutter the space, relics of a life now extinguished. But the familiarity offers no solace here. The quarters are a shrine to decay, a testament to the Plague Voidship's true horror. Every surface is slick with corrosion and a dark, viscous substance that glistens under flickering lights, dripping onto the floor in irregular pools. The air is heavier here, saturated with spores, the faint coppery tang of blood, and a sickly sweet scent that clings to the lungs and gnaws at the mind. Bodies, or what remains of them, litter the room. Some lie sprawled on the bunks, bloated and discolored, eyes wide with terror frozen forever. Others cling to walls or ceilings, fused partially into metal, as if the ship itself has consumed their flesh. Limbs are twisted into grotesque angles, skin split and bubble with pustules that is faintly. Occasionally, a hand twitches on its own, jerking spasmodically as though testing the air, seeking prey. The crew is gone, yet the echoes of their suffering remain, alive in the very walls, in the air, in the unnatural pulse of the vessel. Personal items lie scattered. A hollow log flickers weakly, looping a fragmented memory of laughter and mundane chatter before abruptly cutting to static. Journals are smeared with blood and filth, the handwriting frantic, illegible, spattered with notes of illness, fear, and whispered warnings. Symbols of Nurgle appear scrawled in grime and corrosion, marking the slow inevitability of infection. Somewhere a crib or what remains of one leans askew, a tiny skeletal hand grasping the edge, reaching out as if to warn or curse. The whispers grow louder here, more insistent. They speak intimately, using the voices of friends and colleagues long dead, promising solace even as they threaten torment. The mind begins to fray. Shapes twist at the edge of vision. An eye where there should be none, a shadow that moves independently of the light. The Plague Voidship does not merely house the dead. It rehearses their suffering, projects it into the present, ensuring that even the living intruder feels the endless march of decay. Something moves in the corner of the room. Not fully alive, not fully dead. Its form a sickly imitation of humanity, bloated and dripping. Skin hanging in translucent sheets over a writhing core of infection. It watches silently, its movements minimal yet deliberate, like a predator studying prey. The slightest sound, a boot squeak, a suit adjustment, draws its gaze. The tension is suffocating, a palpable weight pressing against the chest, demanding compliance or punishment. Fear is no longer an abstract sensation here. It is a tangible presence. We move cautiously, touching panels and surfaces lightly, avoiding pools of viscous fluid that hiss on contact. The floor groans beneath the weight of unseen forces, and the walls seem to breathe, exhaling spores that settle on suits, infecting air, mind, and body alike. The very architecture of the quarters is changed. Bunkers that should be parallel now twist into impossible angles, creating paths that loop back upon themselves. Even the layout seems to mock our sense of direction, ensuring that any step forward is also a descent into madness. Here, the plague is at its most personal. It is no longer a distant threat in the shadows or a whisper in the void. It manifests in forms that test comprehension. A former medic, skin rotting yet still tending to corpses. A cook, bloated and fused into the metal, still clutching rusty utensils as if preparing a meal for the dead. The quarters tell a story of inevitability. Resistance is temporary, survival meaningless. To remain here is to witness the slow corruption of life into grotesque, unrecognizable forms. And somewhere hidden in the deeper shadows of the room, a sound rises, a wet, gurgling cough, followed by a faint scratching, a rhythm that resonates with the heartbeat of the ship itself. It is patient. It is hungry. It knows we are here. And as we prepare to leave the quarters, to continue deeper into the vessel, we realize that nothing within these walls will ever truly die, and that the ship has already claimed a part of our mind, a seed of fear and infection that will grow as we descend further. At last, we reach the engine room, the very heart of the Plague Voidship, a place where machinery and rot have fused, creating a living, breathing nightmare. The doors groan as we enter, releasing a gust of air thick with heat, spores, and the unmistakable stench of decay. The light here is dim, sickly green and yellow, reflecting off oily puddles that ripple as if stirred by unseen hands. The engines themselves are grotesque. Pipes and conduits twist unnaturally, fused with flesh-like growths that pulse faintly, pumping fluids that hiss and steam upon contact with the metal hull. Machinery hums with a life of its own, a rhythm that is neither wholly mechanical nor organic. Sparks flicker along tendrils of corrupted wiring, illuminating glimpses of shapes within. Parts of former crew fuse into the engines, limbs tangled in gears, eyes staring blankly yet somehow aware. The sound is a wet, grinding chorus, echoing through the room, a symphony of torment that resonates in the chest and skull alike. Steam vents hiss intermittently, carry with its spores that cling to suits, lungs, and minds. Some drift into the warp of the ship, coiling through cracks and seams like serpents. Shadows twist in the corners, forming shapes that mimic humans, Some with too many limbs, some with bloated, pustulant heads, others with faces frozen in silent screams. The engine room is alive, not in the sense of flesh and blood alone, but in the terrible intelligence of the Plague Voidship itself. It monitors, judges, and manipulates every intruder who dares step across its threshold. We move cautiously among the corrupted engines, avoiding the pools of iridescent fluid that ripple as if alive. Pipes occasionally twitch, releasing blasts of hot, infected steam. Every step feels wrong, as if the floor itself is subtly shifting beneath our feet, guiding us, isolating us, testing our fear. The hum of the warp pulses stronger here, resonating to the hull and penetrating the mind, bringing whispers of madness and visions of grotesque futures where flesh and machine merge in eternal torment. And then we see it. The first fully animated corpse fused into machinery. Its skin is blistered and green, limbs twisted into mechanical appendages, eyes wide and staring. It moves with jerky precision, guided by a corrupt fusion of flesh and machine, its mouth opening in a silent scream that vibrates through the air like a chord of despair. The very sight of it reinforces the certainty. This place does not merely house death. It creates it, cultivates it, and recycles it endlessly into something worse. In the center of the room, the engine's core pulses like a heart corrupted by disease. Tendrils of rusted metal and writhing flesh extend outward, connecting to pipes, walls, and even the hull itself. The core seems to watch, to feed, to anticipate our movements. Sparks and globs of infected oil drip rhythmically, punctuating the low mechanical groan of the engines. Somewhere in the background, a low gurgling grows, like 1,000 lungs inhaling in unison, waiting for the next moment to strike. Every attempt to touch a panel or access logs is met with resistance. Controls are fused with corrosion, wires snake like serpents, hissing when disturbed. The room itself seems to judge us, testing our resolve, feeding on hesitation. And in this place, we realize the full extent of the ship's corruption. It is not just a plague vessel. It is a sentient predator, a parasite that consumes flesh, machine, and mind alike, ensuring that all who enter are marked, infected, and forever altered. The engine room is a crucible of fear. Every sound, every movement, every flicker of light reinforces the understanding. The Plague Voidship is alive in the most horrifying sense. It waits, watches, and shapes reality around intruders. And as we prepare to move onward, toward the bridge, we know that what comes next will challenge not only our senses, but the very fabric of our minds. For the heart of this vessel beats with corruption, and those who dwell here do not merely survive. They are remade. Finally, we reach the bridge, the command center of a vessel long abandoned, yet alive in ways that defy comprehension. The doors groan open slowly, and the air here is heavier still, saturated with the stench of rot, corrosion, and something deeper, something ancient. The room is vast, a cathedral of machinery and decay, with consoles fused to the walls, their screens flickering with incomprehensible symbols. Panels are twisted, wires fused with organic growths that pulse like veins, and everywhere, shadows twist unnaturally, as though the bridge itself watches, breathes, judges. The captain's chair sits at the center, a throne of rusted metal and filth, encrusted with the remnants of the previous crew. Something, someone, appears to have fused with it. A bloated figure, torso fused into the seat, face frozen in an eternal scream, eyes staring yet unseeing. Tendrils of corruption stretch from its form, snaking along the floor and walls like roots, connecting consoles. Consoles to walls, walls to the hull. It is both corpse and conduit, a nexus of the ship's corruption. This is the heart of the Plague Voidship's intelligence, a focal point of disease and sentience, powered by flesh and machine alike. The hololiths flicker with fragmented logs, glimpses of the crew's final moments. Screams, frantic commands, warnings scrawled in desperation, and the last traces of sanity unraveling. The ship had not merely fallen to disease. It had welcomed it, nurtured it, until it became something sentient, something beyond comprehension. The whispers here are no longer just suggestions. They are commands, pulling at the mind, bending reality. Some are comforting, promising immunity, relief from suffering. Others are cruel, depicting infinite torment, grotesque visions of our own mutations if we linger too long. Movement flickers at the edge of vision, shapes too human, too wrong, twist and convulse near consoles, reaching, crawling, testing our presence. The bridge is a stage, and the Plague Voidship its playwright, orchestrating fear and anticipation in perfect harmony. Every breath brings spores into our lungs. Every glance invites hallucination, whispering that what we see may not be real, yet instinct screams otherwise. Here, the mind begins to fracture, reality folding under the weight of the warp and the ship's influence. As we step close to the captain's chair, the corruption pulses in response, a low, resonant thrum that vibrates to the hull and bones alike. The air seems alive, carrying subtle vibrations that manipulate thought, emotion, and perception. Figures flicker at the corners of our vision. Former crew, twisted and grotesque, endlessly repeating their final acts of desperation. Some are fused with consoles, some with walls, some with one another. The bridge is a monument to inevitability. Every life aboard this ship ended in suffering, every mind touched by the plague, every body subsumed into a greater organism. And then we see it, the source, not a demon in the traditional sense, not a machine, but fusion of both ancient and patient, feeding on the vessel's decay, a mass of flesh, metal, and ichor, its form impossible to fully comprehend. Its presence is everywhere and nowhere, felt as a constant pressure in the chest, a whisper in the ear, a twitch in the shadows. The Plague Voidship is not merely a vehicle of pestilence. It is a sentient predator, immortal, feeding on fear, flesh, and sanity alike. And we are prey. Every instinct screams retreat, yet curiosity, folly, or necessity drives us onward. Logs and panels hint at the scale of its corruption. Entire sectors of the Imperium unknowingly consumed, millions infected, fleets lost to the warp as the ship drifts silently, patiently, eternally. And here on the bridge, the true horror becomes clear. The ship is not merely a plague. It is a mind aware, patient, and inexorably hungry, and it has noticed us. The whispers rise into a crescendo, 1,000 voices layering over one another, threatening, cajoling, laughing. The shadows move faster, shapes more defined yet impossibly wrong. The captain's chair pulses with a sickly green light, and the mass at its core shifts as if acknowledging our presence. The bridge, once a place of command, is now a cathedral of despair. To remain is to submit. To flee is to invite pursuit. And the heart of the Plague Voidship waits, calculating, patient, eternal. The bridge recedes behind us as we descend further into the vessel, deeper into corridors that no human mind was meant to navigate. Light flickers violently, casting grotesque shadows that shift with impossible angles. The Plague Voidship is aware. Every heartbeat, every breath, every footstep is observed, catalogued, and warped to its will. The air thickens, pressing against the chest, filling the lungs with spores and whispers, insinuating thoughts, fears, and desires we never knew we had. Reality begins to fracture. Walls warp subtly, expanding and contracting as if the metal itself breathes. Doors appear where none existed. Panels twist into grotesque faces that leer and scream silently. Figures flicker at the edges of vision. Crew members, once human, now bloated and twisted beyond recognition. Some fuse into the walls, some crawling on hands and elongated limbs. Their eyes follow every movement. Their whispers intertwine with our thoughts, promising comfort, vengeance, or release. The mind strains under the weight of perception, doubting itself, questioning what is real and what is a fabrication of the warp. Every corridor is a maze, yet the path feels deliberate, as if the vessel guides intruders toward its heart of corruption. Floors ripple subtly, as though walking on something organic. The faint, wet sound of movement trails us, squelching, gurgling, the subtle drag of unseen appendages. Sometimes a floor panel quivers underfoot, sending tremors through the legs, a silent warning, or perhaps a test of courage. And always, the whispers continue, layered voices of the dead, the living and the unimaginable, urging surrender to the inevitable infection that awaits us. Occasionally, a glimpse of the impossible appears, a hallway stretching into infinite darkness, yet lined with doors, familiar rooms, corridors repeating themselves endlessly. The Plague Voidship is not just a vessel. It is a mind, a predator that toys with perception and willpower. Time itself seems to dilate. Minutes stretch into hours, hours into eternity. The sense of direction erodes. What was forward becomes behind. Every decision feels simultaneously critical and meaningless, a cruel paradox orchestrated by the ship's intelligence. Hallucinations intensify. Faces appear on walls, screaming in silent agony. Hands reach through metal, fingers stretching impossibly long, trying to grasp, to pull intruders into decay. Fluids drip from ceilings and walls, some alive, slithering like serpents, some hissing corrosively upon contact. The smell of rot becomes nearly suffocating, the taste of decay clinging to every inhalation. Even the mind feels infected, thoughts twisting into madness as the Plague Voidship's consciousness seeps in perception, bending fear, anticipation, and hallucination into one relentless tide. In some rooms, the past flickers into focus, crew members performing mundane tasks, only to have them twisted into grotesque repetitions. The cook endlessly stirring a pot of pus and gore, the medic stitching together bodies that ride of their own accord, the pilot staring into empty void as tendrils of infection crawl along the control panels. We realize with dread that this is not merely memory. It is an endless loop, replayed by the ship itself, a lesson in futility and inevitability. And then the whispers speak clearly, using our own names, referencing thoughts we had never shared, fears we had never confessed. The Plague Voidship reaches inside, not only to observe but to manipulate, to corrode sanity with a subtle touch of psychic plague. Every step forward feels heavier, a psychological weight pressing against the chest. The mind, the very soul. Reason falters, hope dissolves, and paranoia becomes instinct. Trust becomes impossible. Even our own senses are unreliable, bending to the will of the ship. Here, in the bowels of the Plague Voidship, the line between self and vessel begins to blur. The corridors are no longer mere passageways. They are extensions of the ship's consciousness, bending, twisting, feeding on fear. Every breath, every blink, every heartbeat strengthens a connection, and the inevitable truth becomes clear. No one leaves unchanged. The descent into madness is not optional. It is the first stage of assimilation, and the further we go, the deeper we fall, the closer we come to becoming part of the vessel itself, an eternal witness to its corruption and decay. The corridors stretch endlessly before us, yet the exit is somewhere out there, beyond the reach of reality, beyond the grasp of reason. Every turn twists in impossible angles. Every hatch leads to another labyrinth of corruption. The Plague Voidship reacts to our presence now, not with subtlety, but with force. Panels slam shut, doors groan under pressure, and walls flex in ways that should be impossible. It knows we seek escape, and it does not intend to allow it. Behind us, the corridors shiver with movement. Shapes we cannot fully perceive skitter along walls, vanish, then reappear ahead, blocking potential paths. The whispers are relentless, now layered with screaming, mocking laughter, and 1,000 distorted voices calling our names. Fears become tangible, a living force that presses upon the chest, the mind, the very soul. Each step forward feels heavier, as though we drag not only our bodies, but the weight of the ship's centuries of corruption. The air is thick with spores, swirling like storm clouds, clinging to suits, inhaled with every desperate breath. Some burn, some numb, all distort the mind, twisting perception into hallucination. Shadows stretch into monstrous forms, shapes that blend flesh and metal, reaching with tendrils that drip ichor and corruption. It is everywhere, behind, ahead, above, below. The Plague Voidship has become omnipresent, omniscient, and omnipotent in its domain. Escape is no longer a question of skill. It is a question of will. Hatches jam under unseen pressure. Corridors twist and fold, bending space itself. Our maps and sensors are useless. Even instinct misleads. At every junction, a choice must be made, yet every choice is wrong. Shapes flicker in the periphery. Crew long dead, now grotesque and animated, their eyes hollow yet full of malevolent awareness. Some step into the corridor, advancing toward us in jerky, unnatural movements, mouths opening to emit low gurgles, moans, and whispers that tear at the psyche. Each encounter threatens infection, corruption, and inevitable transformation. The ship tests, tortures, and isolates. One member falters, succumbing to hallucinations, shadows reaching, voices seducing, floors shifting beneath them. Screams echo as their form distorts, limbs twisting, skin blistering, flesh melding with the surrounding metal. We witness it helplessly. The Plague Voidship feeds on despair, consuming hope and replacing it with a creeping certainty of inevitable infection. Resistance is not merely futile. It is a first step toward being absorbed into the vessel's living heart. Desperation mounts. Doors finally yield. Corridors narrow to a single path. Yet even here, the shadows grow denser, the whispers louder. The ship pulsates around us, a heartbeat of corruption and death. Fluids drip from overhead conduits, sizzling on contact with the deck, while strange, writhing gross pulse from the walls. It is a living, conscious entity, aware of our fear, measuring our resolve, preparing its final judgment. We reach what appears to be the final hatch, leading to the outer airlock. Relief surges, brief, fragile, before reality fractures again. The hatch distorts, twisting into grotesque angles. The handle seems to move as if alive, retreating from our grasp. Behind, the ship surges, shadows pressing in, tendrils snaking toward our feet, our limbs, our suits. The choice crystallizes. Fight through, risking infection, madness, and death, or surrender to the inevitable, allowing the vessel to consume body, mind, and soul. With a final effort, we wrench the hatch open. The void beyond glimmers faintly. The stars indifferent. The cold silence of space offering the first real sensation of freedom. But the ship does not relent. A wet, gurgling roar echoes behind as the vessel reaches, pulsates, and lashes out in frustration. Behind us, Corridors collapse into themselves. Shadows twist and scream. Some escape, some do not, and those who survive are irrevocably changed, minds frayed, bodies tainted, haunted forever by the Plague Voidship's touch. As we drift into the emptiness of space, gasping and scarred, we glance back at the ship, a hulking silhouette against the stars. Silent again, patient, waiting, it drifts, eternally hungry, a predator of flesh and sanity, seeking the next intruders, the next foolish souls. A single night aboard the Plague Voidship is ended, yet its nightmare continues. And in the grim darkness of the far future, there is no escape from what watches, waits, and feeds in the void. The void is silent once more, yet the memory of the Plague Voidship lingers like a stain upon the mind. Its hull drifts endlessly, a predator in wait, a cathedral of decay and corruption that feeds upon the living, the brave, the foolish. It is patient, eternal, and indifferent to the passage of time. What we experience, a single night aboard its decks, is only a fragment of its existence, a fleeting glimpse into the slow, inexorable horror it cultivates. The air, once thick with spores and rot, now clears, yet the mind carries a taint. Hallucinations, whispers, and shadows are not easily forgotten. Faces flicker at the edge of vision. Shapes twitch in peripheral sight, and the faint pulse of the ship seems to echo in memory. Those who survive are never the same. A part of them remains aboard, entwined with the Plague Voidship, a seed of fear, a whisper of infection that will never fully fade. And for those who have never seen it, those still drifting in the safety of stars and silence, the ship waits, patient, watching. The universe is vast, but its hunger is greater. One day it will reach again. One day it will claim more lives, more minds, more bodies, adding to its collection of decay and despair. And the cycle will repeat, unending, unstoppable, eternal. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is no escape from horror. There is no refuge from pestilence, from corruption, from the inexorable pull of a sentient plague. A single night aboard the Plague Voidship teaches a truth that no amount of preparation can erase. Fear is not merely an emotion. It is the first weapon of the universe, and some nightmares are eternal,